Hey up and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. You've just got us two tonight. It is a pleasure to be with you, Mr. Hope. We haven't got any guests tonight. We're just going to have a bit of a chew in the fat. We haven't done one for a couple of weeks and months. We've got some incredible guests lined up over the next few weeks. But yeah, just me and Mr. Hope tonight. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I been in the car quite a bit recently, and it's sent me back to podcasts because I was bored after an hour of listening to the same songs over and over again on the standard radio station, Radio 1. Everything else, there are other radio stations out there. But I listened to some good ones. I'm just trying to think of the one I've listened to. This is really bad. I've not prepared. What have you been up to? Have you listened to?
I've listened to some incredible stuff.
You tell me yours, and then I'll tell you mine.
So I've listened to. I've got myself back up to date on Bartlett. So he's been talking about loads of stuff around. One of them was about pregnancy, which I listened to just because it was there. But it was very interesting about fertility. But they were also talking about neuroscience and neurohealth and the things that you can do for that. Lots of exercise conversations. So they've been good. But I'm part way through, not quite finished, the conversation on Rogan with the Harris brothers, who are doing a lot of work around ethical AI and building AI programs. So that's pretty powerful, and just some great content there. You're right. I've done the same. I've been driving to London and Manchester and other Nottingham, so it's just great because you can just bang on podcast after podcast, can't you? So
you can. So I've gone back way because I've not watched them for a while, but I listened to 60% with George Heaton from Represent.
Yeah,
very really strong entrepreneur. Not sure I'm a massive fan of George.
Is he a Man United fan?
I don't know. Sometimes I was like, but really good listening as a whole. I listened to The Hard Geezer. That's good, man. That's so good. That's so good. And obviously,
for our US listeners, you'll need to, if you haven't looked at The Hardest Geezer, he's the guy that ran from the south of Africa right the way up to the north, the length of Africa. Ran it. Absolutely.
And the stories around when he was kidnapped and held and all those kind of things, in the 7 hours on the bike, but also as a extreme endurance athlete, which I'm definitely not. I've run, but and then I also listened to. Oh, come on! Why can I not find it? I love this episode, and why can I not find it? Sorry, everybody that can't see me scrolling. I am scrolling to try and find it, but Adam
Grant.
Yes.
Yeah, I knew Adam Grant. His books are. I don't know if you've read any of his books. Have you read any of his books?
The originals. So at the end it says you can buy these as a bundle, and I was like, well, that's what happened when I managed to stop for a coffee on the way back. I was like, I bought the bundle, so this is the first books I've bought in a while.
Nice.
So because he's got 3 books now, hasn't he?
Yeah, Think Again is good. I finished Hidden Potential a few weeks ago. Very, very good.
Yeah,
very
and
good.
Originals looks really, really good. But yeah, really good. Talking about like it links and in my thought process, like things like about genius jerks and great teams and all of these things, and talks about the Ronaldo effect on it and all. And I was thinking that's a lot that I've been talking about in terms of the leadership stuff and the stuff that I'm going to cover pretty soon at the AOC AI conference, where I'm like, it's about culture, and I think Joe, that's what stuff a lot of time that I spend myself immersed in terms of the culture side of anything. That all of these people that talk about the strategy is brilliant.
Yep.
But ultimately, if you haven't got your culture right, nothing's going to land.
Yes, bang on that. And interestingly, that has become a theme for our Edufuturists Trends booklet actually as well, which we've got lots of people already putting their thoughts into that, and we're going to launch at the Uprising.
It's a new thing though, isn't it, that? Because last year was the first year, 2023 Uprising. Don't forget, 11th of July. Still some tickets available.
There might not be by the time this goes out.
Maybe not. Yeah, we've got a long waiting list. We are, as of today, we've sold more tickets than we did last year.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
I don't know if you've seen our individual nominations, Ben, and how many we've had. And I think last time we announced it, and again, this will be really, really delayed, so it could be more than that. Did we tell everybody that we'd had more than 5,000 nominations? I don't know if you've seen as of today, but we've hit 8,500.
Wow, 8,500 votes on it's just incredible.
Yeah, that's across the board. So we're absolutely really, really excited, and because the community is getting behind it as always this year. Ben, shout out to Ben. Ben did a great thing where we were having a discussion about the trends booklet that's going to be our second year of publication. Some new trends that have come in, the different week signals, as we call it, from the year in the podcast. A lot of that will be quite recent in terms of, because we had a bit of a sabbatical, and then obviously relaunched it as me and Ben. But the great thing that Ben identified was, we're a community. It's not about us. Let's ask the community for some of their stories based on the trends that we're finding. So if you are listening and it's before the deadline, Ben, is the
14th of June.
14th
so
of
this,
June.
this will have gone out. So it'll be this. If you're listening this week, you'll have had time.
You've still got some time. Get it in before the deadline. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, and love for the community to play a part in what they think around the themes that we're finding and you've probably listened to this year around those different week signals. We've seen those things on culture. We've seen those things on holistic education. We've seen those things around the future of education, just been around knowledge and everything else. And it's been interesting that we've had a real variety. We'll talk about that. We're going to do a bit of a recap. But over the year, and even since me and Ben kicked it back off in January, where despite where those people have come from, what we thought the topic of the conversation might be, a lot of it's led back to some of those in various ways. Like, if you think about Ed Kerwin and all the different things around empathy, skills, and that whole thing of in the age of artificial intelligence, which is definitely going to be featuring heavily. Why would it not? The focus on education of human intelligence, those real granular focusings, the things that we call soft skills, they're not soft anymore. They're the key essential things that we need to develop in our young people around communication critical, but curation, curiosity, compassion, all of those things constantly come out in our conversations. Despite who we're speaking to. I don't know whether we're leading that through some unconscious bias. I don't think we are, because when people listen to us, it just seems to, that's the kind of focus of what everybody in terms of the future of education believe. But I don't know how you feel about that, Ben, and whether you think that's right on trend.
I think you're right. I think there's that whole. I don't know if we're leading it. I think we might just be amplifying it as much as anything else. And ultimately, we're seeing weak signals. We're not actually creating the weak signals. And I think that's part of what we're about. We're not trying to say we are the voices of the future of education. We're saying we want to highlight and spotlight the voices about the future of education. It's why we interview as many people as we do. And interestingly, if those people who have been listening to us for a while, and even if you haven't, just think through this process, that we regularly tell people we aren't the Edufuturists. It's a community of people who are pushing the envelope for the future of education. Yeah, we get called the Edufuturist and we have the brand, but it's an Edufuturist community. Anybody who's pushing the future of education is an Edufuturist. We say that a lot. But the second thing that sits in there is this idea around it's all well and good talking about this is where education needs to go, this is what's broken, this is what needs fixing, or not even just what's broken, what needs to change, whether it needs an evolution or a revolution. We can do all of that stuff. But if we don't celebrate those that are doing it on the way, and we don't champion those people, and we don't listen to those people, then actually all we're doing is we're just pushing the can down the road, and we're forgetting and realising the people that make this happen in the schools, colleges, universities, nurseries, learning centres, online learning courses, all these people that are committed to education and learning. If we don't champion that, then there's something wrong in that space, and that's why the awards came into being, right? And that's the reason why we want to listen to the community around the trends. But what I would say in that is that we've got to really acknowledge that we're celebrating where we are, but certainly on the way to where we're going, and thinking about what is coming down the line. Interestingly, just to throw one other thing in there, Steve, before you jump in, is that I was speaking to some. Recently, I was speaking to a group of educators who work in the special schools with students with additional needs, and that was incredible, because they're looking at what's the AI tools or the EdTech tools that are available to us. It was incredible. It was an absolute privilege, especially with being my brother having learning difficulties, and also my a massive passion in that space anyway. And these educators are really doing incredible things. But what was really interesting in that space was they really wanted to ask the question of like what does the future of education look like? How are we getting there, and what do we do? Because we're in a system where we can do all this fancy technology, and then like we say, here we go again, sitting with a pen and a piece of paper in an exam hall. So we've got to think about systemic stuff, and we've got to think about boots on the ground. So that we've got to fight on the system, but also do some things on the ground, just like we talked about when we had Andy Griffith and Matt Bromley on. Andy Griffith and Matt Bromley, they talked about that idea that we've got to do what can we do in the classroom, boots on the ground, as well as think about the systemic challenges and changes.
I agree. And I think just thinking back to the podcast that we've both been listening to and everything else, and I think one of my favourite books, Rebel Ideas, talked about on the podcast that I've been listening to. I think it was on the one that we've just talked about in terms of the Diary of the CEO, and talks about that. If you surround yourself and think about recruiting based on culture and a culture fit, you're always only going to get. And I think this is where, when companies are in startup mode, go really, really well and quickly, because they're constantly challenging each other and positively, through radical candor and positive conflict of ideas, are constantly thinking about how we can get better and everything else. But if we constantly just surround ourselves with people that are always thinking the same way, in exactly the same way, not just same thoughts, we're not getting any diversification in terms of the thought process. And it's nice that if somebody comes in that does listen to us and disagrees with what we're saying, or thinks something can be done differently, or thinks, I get that, but could we that's absolutely fantastic as well, because we want those, there are elements that this community is trying to move away from, the exam halls and as the only endpoint. So that's not necessarily the diverse thought that we want. But what I'm saying is, could it be a mixture? Have you got any other different thinking? Like, we have people on a regular basis. We ask those 3 questions that we're going to be mixing up, aren't we, for the next couple? But one of those is, what do you think the future of exams are? Traditional, online, or scrapped? If you've been listening, if you haven't, well, go back and listen and see what everybody thinks. But ultimately, not everybody said exactly the same thing. We've got people who we agree with in terms of holistic education, but they still think it might be traditional or online. Some people think scrapped. That's different potentially to what we think, but that's good as well, because it's not just a case, and it's hard to get the point across when it's just a one answer or a one-word answer, is yes, no.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have gone in to explain why they think that, and that's, as long as you can articulate it and still think about the future of education, is it's good.
Do you know what? We are trained in society now to be polar opposites, to have a dichotomy. It's either this or this. You can't have a third way that maybe is a little bit of something. It's not necessarily you've got to be on a linear scale and a continuum, and either you are left or you're right or you whatever else. And it doesn't need to necessarily be that. And I think that's what's really powerful. And interestingly, we one thing that's worth shouting here is that we're not anti-independent schools, we're not anti-international schools, we're not anti-fee-paying stuff, which is you might think, based on what we normally talk about, that we would. Well, no, people should have choice, and whatever else it sits in that space, and ultimately we celebrate independent schools as part of Edufuturists Awards.
We do.
Well.
I think
we speak to them, and that's really, really important that people hear that just because you might have a certain political persuasion or a certain theory around stuff, you can't just say that we're not going to listen to anybody else and that's all we're thinking about.
Yeah. And they do give an opportunity for. It's harder to change state education because of obviously the shackles that government have put on.
Yeah.
I think at times the people that we've had on, like Will Goldsmith from B-Dale and those kind of individuals, where they have an opportunity to do things more radically and think differently and move it forward because they're beyond the shackles of that state education, which is a systemic thing that's harder to change. So if they can change it, and they can then show and leave the tiny breadcrumbs of and lead the way and lead those steps of how to get there over a period of time, it shows it can be done. We just need the appetite and that want. I think the how is kind of been demonstrated by those organisations, but the want to do it is a different thing. And just to kind of go back, and we're stepping into that review. One that I'm just trying to think how far we go back, but I was looking at our recent ones, Ben, there's absolutely loads in regards to those things around, skills, collaboration, and a lot of stuff that actually is around the project award this year. But the one that obviously, of course, jumps out to me is remember your why and fill up your cup. I remember
because he sung it and got his guitar out.
I think so, but also I remember as soon as I met the guy and met Action Jackson in Dublin at that event, I said to you, because you went to Neil Malarkey and I was gutted I missed that one, and I went to Action and then we got them both on, and we both it was as good as what we'd kind of promised each other, I guess, because that's our bit of learning as well. But I think his profound effect on ultimately, and I was thinking about this in the car. I'm not doing a good well of that articulating, going back and listening to, but I think the future of education, yes, it's about skills and it's about all this different stuff. But as parents, Ben, we constantly talk about what we want for our children. And I think the reason we are passionate about education wasn't about because we were teachers first before we became parents. But I think this is what still drives us, even though we're outside of education and supporting it from the periphery now. But if you think about what we want for our children and how we want our children to be developed, money and all of that stuff is great, but we want our children to be happy.
Yeah.
We want our children to be kind. We want our children to have compassion and empathy and understanding for others and all that kind of stuff. And I think we drive that in our children, which is great as a parent and we should do. But I think we both believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the reason why that should be the future of education is because we want it for our children that are actually going through the education system, or my children are about to go into it.
Yeah, it definitely is about our... even though my kids are well involved in it, I know probably I can't do much to change or what's going to happen. Certainly for my eldest, who is coming towards the end of year 8, second year of high school. Is anything going to change for her before she leaves it, does her GCSEs? Probably not.
But could it change by the time she gets the degree?
100% it could. And also, I've got a 10-year-old on Saturday, she's 10, who it could change for. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that it could change for. And actually, it's the same old. Like, we talk about this all the time, standing on the shoulders of giants. The Bob Harrisons of this world, the obviously recent sad passing of David Price, OBE, who made a massive impact on what we did and on education in the UK. So David Price, Bob Harrison, Rose Looking, Valerie Hannon, these Siddhartha Mitra, these are, who have just gone and battled. Ken Robinson, who battled and didn't see it in their necessarily, or aren't seeing it in their lifetime. These people, a lot of these people are still alive, but others that haven't. But they've decided that they're going to plant trees under whose shade they're not going to sit, and that's the strength of a community and a country, and a strength of a quality of a person. I think sits on that about setting a legacy. And I'm not saying that we're anywhere near going to set a legacy of what these wonderful people have done, but if we can just do our little bit, I suppose, to champion the underdog, to do things a little bit different, to challenge that status quo. That dissatisfaction stuff with the status quo is absolutely where it goes. And I think, thinking about the podcast that we've had on and the conversations that we've had, you're right, that conversation with Action was incredible, right? And just stepping back even one before that, we interviewed Petra Velzeboer, who we probably had a discussion about this one already, but Petra grew up in a religious cult and then left that, and then is now working in that mindfulness and well-being space, and the support, health and well-being, maybe not mindfulness as much, but that health and well-being in a corporate space. And we learnt loads in that conversation around about beginning with you and understanding how you bring your authentic self into a space. And what I love about that is that, and we've done this quite a lot, Steve, haven't we? We've managed to get people into a conversation with us who aren't educators. And in fact, this is probably one of the biggest learnings that I get from this space, is that sometimes, and it's not saying that educators can't solve education, but sometimes we just need to have a little bit of an outside perspective, that we aren't in an echo chamber, in a bubble of this is how we've always done it. This is education. It can't change. It can't do this. Well, they are doing it in business. They are doing it in charitable sector. They are doing it in the voluntary sector. Like it is happening. So why can't it happen in education? And if it can, do we need to change some stuff to make sure that it can, or is it different? And in that space, and I think my big thought on that is that I hear this said a lot, and I've probably said it myself, and I've certainly sat in training sessions when I was teaching, saying, "Why would I listen to you? You've never been a teacher." And I've also heard myself say it to people, like the kudos is, I used to be a teacher, and I know that I understand what it feels like. Well, does that really matter? It does in some senses, but do we perhaps need to listen to voices outside of our echo chamber and bubble?
And I think that comes back to what we said earlier in terms of those rebel ideas and that diverse thought and thinking. And again, another person that I was fanboy of Action Jackson, Neil Malarkey, one of the other recent podcast guests that has never been involved in education, comes from a really different, doesn't technically come from business, even though businessman and done some great stuff. But that whole bit of how can the work that Neil's done for such a long period of time in terms of improv affect how we behave? It can filter down to a classroom because sometimes students are unpredictable, how they respond, how they engage. That whole thing of, especially primary kids, when it's windy, horses and primary children just go mad. They're unpredictable. You have to think on your feet. You don't know what you're going to say. But even as a leader, you lead in your way, I lead in my way, and leaders in education at times, how do they think on their feet and improv based on the situation rather than a script? Some bits that can't be learned, and it goes back to, without listening to people like that can influence and shape things. If leaders are only being mentored by people that have done it before, we're just getting the same voices in the echo chamber. We're not getting that diverse thought of people that go, "Oh, that's great." And I've constantly trying to surround and listen to voices of people that are outside my sector now, that are leading different businesses, that don't see themselves as leaders, that have diverse thoughts and diverse thinking in terms of different approaches. Because you need that, because if you only use the same ideas, you cannot, and I go back to, I think it was Siddhartha Mitra that said it, of you can't fix new problems with old solutions. And I think in education, getting people like Neil Malarkey, new voices into there that to engage and deliver and support our leaders and teachers really starts to think about the new ways to support and lead in education.
For sure. And I think, like episode 242, we had Ben and Aaron on from Inventor Club, and that is very real. Is that Ben, obviously, as a former Dyson engineer, has started their own work in that education space to help in that D&T space, essentially. But they're bringing invention into education, and curiosity and imagination and prototyping and all that process of engineering into education, and design technology, not just design technology, actually that process of design thinking and sprints and invention into any subject. And I love that. I love the fact that we've talked about, we've had an improv comedian, we've had a woman who grew up in a religious cult, we have a Dyson engineer, we've had all sorts in this space. But actually, as we kind of come to it, you think about that episode with Carl Gombrich from LIS, London Interdisciplinary School. Interestingly here, and this is how I think this ties together, we've gone from talking about lots of people outside of education, and then somebody who is an absolute academic running an academic university, LIS, and he's saying, rather than doing a a degree that is just in one thing, a university degree in one thing. We need interdisciplinary skills, multiple disciplines in order to be able to survive in the world that we're moving into. Well, if that doesn't say there's a thread through what we're saying, I don't know what is. And that's why we're probably talking about this trend stuff that we're talking about, this holistic education, this beyond exams, this idea that we need to think about culture. Because if you are strategic about just developing skills, certain independent skills, rather than interdisciplinary skills, or you're just going to develop a certain subject, then what do we do when what do we do now that AI can do some of these things for us? And increasingly, that's going to get that's the knowledge rich curriculum that was the benchmark of UK education when we were top of the tables and all the stuff around the world. it's just unnecessary, and that's a challenge, massive challenge.
Yeah, I think if you think about when I was growing up, the children and the people that were deemed the smartest people were the ones who could retain information.
Yeah.
I went to school decades ago. Pretty old.
Very.
Got a bit of grey in my hair.
Old. Very old.
Ben's got a bit of grey in his hair, but you just can't see it right now. Must
On
have
the
been a light.
chest.
But that has completely changed. That ultimately, if you don't have the knowledge, you have to have some.
Yeah.
But the ability where I could ask the question to the internet, fast forward to 2 or 3 years into Gen I, since it has really come to the forefront in education, of the ability to question, ask the right question, and obviously we call it prompt engineering or whatever you call it, but it's the ability to ask something and have conversations effectively written, verbally, that you go into some of the schools that we potentially disagree with in some of their regards and some of their aspects, because they want silent classrooms of people being instructed to and seen as passive vessels. How is that demonstrating curiosity and independence and the ability for a child to, in whatever format and medium, ask those questions and develop that skill rather than just write it down based on their knowledge in their head? Because if you don't know something, you've asked 2 questions, it's on to somebody else now. That's not developing curiosity and somebody's ability to constantly, still don't get it.
Yeah.
And I think our education system, through no fault of the teachers and often the leaders in those individual schools, multi-academy trust colleges, that we're so shackled because we have to move on to the next thing because we have to teach that bit, what's on the curriculum. We're not in allowing our young people to develop those questioning skills of when they don't get it, to ask another question till they get it.
Yeah.
And I get it. We've got to know it's not just about that one child, but that was always my struggle when I was a teacher of, I can't give time to those people who aren't getting it because I've got to move on and I've got to get onto something else. It was a real bugbear and a real quandary that I felt. I always never sat well with me.
No, and and me too. And almost like curriculum coverage is the most important thing. And then you have the flip side to that, Steve, where you have a kid that smashed it and ignores it and can do it, and then you just got to carry on teaching them because they're not allowed to move to year 3 curriculum because they're in year 2. I remember having that exact same conversation with my with the head teacher at my daughter's school. I said to him, I went, you've told me at Christmas she's exceeding expectations in everything. So what are you doing now? Oh, we're just doing more to consolidate that. I said, so you're not pushing her into year 3 stuff? Oh, no. And then when I asked the question, the conversation was of why was because, well, what will she do in year 3 then was the first point. And I said, I don't care what she does in year 3. Put her into year 4. My conversation at that point was, surely it isn't about doing more of the same or consolidate. Like, just, it's not even about racing through a curriculum. We're not asking any of this stuff. What we're saying is just be better at getting this whole conversation around personalizing that learning and whatever that student needs, whether that is more of the same or whether that is more but different or less, because that's what they can cope with and that's what they can process at that moment. That's okay. It's when you have a benchmark that this is what it is. And we've got to have that bell curve, and we've got to have performance tables, and we've got to give a four-star grade on Ofsted. That's the BS in it all. And I can go too harsh on this. And I think the whole like modality of that we have in the education system that we're sat in is this: somebody sat in an ivory tower somewhere determines what the curriculum needs to be. It's not personalised, and unless we think about that AI tool, them AI tools and things that we're talking about that are genuinely allow that individualised personal stuff, we're putting that on teachers and expecting that of teachers. Every student, every child matters. Every student should have a personal learning goal and a personal learning journey. What without using AI, you're expecting a teacher to do that, and then we wonder why teachers are leaving in the droves. And that is the very reason why we're having the conversation that we're having at the Uprising as well. So Ian Phillips, who many of you know, who's worked in this space for a long time, he's chairing a panel which is asking that question about the war for teachers. It's not the war on teachers. It's not about that we're going at teachers, because we're not. The war for teachers in terms of recruitment, retention, and resourcing, because teachers are leaving and we can't replace them. We aren't getting enough people wanting to apply for the jobs, and them teachers that are in there are under-resourced. So what do? We can't just keep saying this is the case. We've got to think, what do we do?
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it'd be good.
As soon as we started having a conversation, and a lot of these things, Ben's just announced it, so we've just got to talk about it now. But no, a lot of these stuff it's never under non-disclosure with us. If you listen to our podcast, we constantly just drip feed exciting stuff because we're passionate about it. We've
announced that already, Steve. Yeah. It's already out.
Have we?
Yeah. The fireside chat with Ian is out in socials.
I'm sure it's because you can tell Ben does the socials and every bit of our Edufuturists stuff. But but no, I think it's been in planning for a long period of time. We're really excited and we really appreciate the guests that we're going to announce. I don't think we've done the guests, have we?
Not yet.
Perfect. So I'm not. Yeah, it's brilliant. I'm not that far behind. Then we're really excited that Ian's going to be steering that fireside chat. We're excited for the title and the discussions it's going to have. But it's not just the people that are going to be sitting on the panel. There's going to be a real opportunity to ask the questions, to listen, and for the community there to engage.
Yeah.
And if you want Ben says I could really go in on this one. If you want to listen to Ben really go in and stuff, wait till he's had a beer at the Uprising. So Ben's probably going to do the first half and I'll do the second half.
No, I'm not. I'm not just not going to drink as much.
We've moved from energy drinks to everything else, but
no
we
energy,
love it.
No energy drink. But what we've got to acknowledge as well in the UK, and this is the bit. Those who don't know this thing is that on the we originally were having this on the 4th of July. And because of a few other things, we ended up moving it and having to put it the week later on the 11th of July, which I know I'm really sorry for those people who can't make it on the 4th. Could have made it on the 4th, but can't make it on the 11th. What I will say is this. It was almost like we'd preempted what was going to happen in the UK on the 4th of July, which is we're going to have a general election, which could be a tumultuous time. But what we do know is that by the 11th of July, we will have had an election and potentially a new setup. It could be all up in the air. What I am going to commit to, Steve, is there's going to be no political chanting from me, because we might have some people from different political persuasions there, and I have to get better at this of accepting different viewpoints, interdisciplinary viewpoints.
Yeah, just try not to offend anybody.
Well,
but we all love Ben. He does it with the best intention. Ben's always kind. But passionate. Yeah. So if you know Ben, it's never done with an unkind heart. It's always done with an overexcited passion, and that's a very different thing.
I'm excited, puppy. That's what it is.
Yeah, and that's absolutely brilliant. We love you for it, Ben. And we're excited to see you up on stage if we have a stage this year. A very different venue. Everybody that's been in, I've been at an event in Leeds today, and I was going, I can't believe you're having it at the Red Bull Station. We love that venue. So I don't know if I've told you this, Ben, but everybody I've spoken to about Leeds are really excited that we've got it in that. Anybody who is coming to the Uprising doesn't know what they're in for yet. Ben's not seen the venue. Very, very soon we're going to be going through. Ben's either going to love it or hate it. Hopefully he likes it because we can't go backwards it now. There's no chance we're finding another venue. But it's very us.
Right.
I say we're not very white walls. Me and Ben have both looks like we've got white walls. But generally, in terms of our approach, the way that we approach things and everything else, what our feedback was, what we loved last year, we loved listening to what people said during the event, what people said after the event. And I was speaking to somebody, who was it? It was one of our sponsors, who's a good friend of ours. And I'm not going to name them, but they said, I'm really excited for your event. And I was like, oh, brilliant. I said, and he's like, I've spoken to another person I won't mention, and they absolutely loved it. They said it was the best event and awards that they attended in the last 2 years. And I was like, wow. I was like, I can't, really? And they're like, yeah, because he said what this person said is they attend a lot of these events, and it was so different to what they're used to. We're not corporate.
Yeah.
Then ultimately, we're not saying don't wear a tuxedo. What we're saying is, you're amazing. You wear what you feel comfortable in at our awards. If you want to wear a tuxedo and come as Dumb and Dumber, brilliant. If you want to wear scuba gear,
that's what we should do.
If you want to wear scuba gear and flippers and a mask, and you feel comfortable in that, you wear that. Wear what you feel comfortable in. Bring your real, true, authentic self. Within reason, don't come in some S&M gear or something. You know, that's a bit weird. Or your pants, again, that's a little bit weird. But as long as within reason, bring your true, authentic self.
I reckon
we are excited to see you there.
Yeah,
and we're so excited to be
we're
pushing it.
We're going to get gimp masks, aren't we?
Absolutely not. I won't go into too much, but yeah, I'm not doing that again. Just to put that into context, that sounds really dodgy. Stag do's and everything else all are bizarre. But no, we're edging closer. Me and Ben get really nervous at this time. As you can imagine, we do this for passion. We do it because we love it. There's an awful amount of work that goes into something that we don't want thanks for because we love it.
Yeah.
But there's going to be periods of stress in there over the next 3-4 weeks. We seem like we've better planned, Ben. I don't know about you, but I think that we've cracked it. I think a lot of the stuff that we didn't feel that we had last year is already in the planning, and we already know that's there and it's already lined up.
True.
We've kind of got the ducks in a row. There's some stuff and big stuff that we still got to sort out. But you know what? Every year we do it, and when that music comes off, and the smoke machine or the DJ kicks in to that music when we first and the community are there, it all just becomes worth it because we feel some real energy. We do it selfishly because we love that.
Yeah.
But also for when those people's name are announced as shortlisters, because everybody will be and highly commended, and when the winners are announced, the impact it has on some of those people that have dedicated their lives, whatever role they're in, to changing and transforming the lives of young people across the UK and potentially further afield, is why we do it. Mm. And just to celebrate, raise them up and say, you know what, you're doing a great job. Fucking well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And very much looking forward to it. It's been a really interesting last few months, and we're very excited for the Uprising, but also excited for some of our guests that are coming up in the next setup. So, it's been 40 minutes of a conversation about our passions, how people have helped us pull some threads through, and then we're going to see some trends in. And if you, like we said right at the top of this, if you haven't already got your ticket, I think we'll probably still have some off for the next week or so, but we haven't got loads left. So it is a limited venue. So uprising.edufuturists.com to get your tickets, and also check out our socials if you want to feature in our trends booklet or opportunity to feature in our trends booklet that we're going to give out. It's going to be good, mate. It's been a good week. It's been a good few months, and we're very much looking forward to where we go next.
Indeed. Exciting times.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Cheers.